Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss how Jacob Rees-Mogg's words have come back to bite him yet again, as his previous insistence that we would not be adopting the EU rules on universal chargers is taken spectacularly out of Tory hands because, as predicted, producers are just adopting those rules and bringing them to Britain anyway. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So the common Brexit refrain is that by leaving the EU, we wouldn't have to put up with all those bothersome EU rules anymore. No, EU rules would still be deciding things for us. We just won't be deciding what they are. The latest from Apple and their iPhone development is a case in point. Just over a year ago, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was a cabinet minister at the time, was belly-aching about the EU's moves to harmonise charging ports for things like phones, tablets and so on. Cannot for the life of me understand why any vaguely thinking person would be against it. That all chargers are the same, so that no matter which phone or similar rechargeable device you wanted to charge, you can just plug it in and away you go. Cannot tell you how many times I come to try and find, well, which is the cable for this phone or which is the cable for this tablet. But because Rees-Mogg is an ideological simpleton and the idea to harmonise came from the EU, he was against it. Thankfully, he said in Parliament, we left the EU before it decided to mandate what sort of phone chargers we can have. He described this as having a negative effect on consumers. Now, not obvious to me why being able to charge any of my devices with any charging cable would be a negative effect. I would welcome it. Not sure it was obvious to anyone who was listening to him either. But at the same time as those ill-chosen words were stumbling out of his cavernous cranium, many of us were pointing out that if the EU go ahead with this rule change, then it would be coming to Britain anyway. Manufacturers weren't going to make two different charging ports for the EU and the British market unless they had to. For main cables, you need a different fitting, but for USB cables, no. It costs too much. You don't have multiple production lines if you can help it. iPhone would make their changes to comply with the EU ruling, and they would do that for the whole world because they're obviously not going to stop selling to one of the wealthiest consumer markets on the planet, and the same models would then be sold in Britain, just like everywhere else. And this is what has now happened. It was in the news yesterday. Apple have announced that it's retiring its Lightning charger and is adopting the USB-C for all of their devices, for all over the world. By far and away, the best of them, the myriad types of ports, because you don't faff with the orientation, you just plug it in. That's it, plug it in. Apple have not been happy about it, but from 2024, if they want to sell anything in the EU, they needed it to have USB-C charging compatibility, so now it's going to. No designing subtly different ports for different devices so that you can flog your customers loads of charging cables at a premium. Now a customer can get the cable from wherever they like and use it on their iPhone. And that is what will be happening in Britain at the same time, and it's because the EU legislated for it. And this just goes to show we don't escape the gravity of EU rules by leaving the EU, even if we wanted to. Consider that if an absolute megalodon of an international corporation like Apple, one of the hugest companies in the world, they have had to begrudgingly change their production to meet EU rules. They didn't want to, they had to. If they will do it, so will every company on earth who wants to access the European market. Absolutely everything that is produced anywhere in the world that has been sold in Britain is being manufactured according to the requirements of the EU. This is not just because they represent such a wealthy market, but one which is continually driving standards up. And because it is cheaper to run as few production lines as possible, you produce to the highest standards of the markets you wish to access, and then you just sell that product everywhere. The iPhones sold in America are going to have this same charging port. because it's also fine in America. You know, so assuming that the higher standards meet the approval of your other markets, you then just have one design, which you produce and sell everywhere. But it means products sold in Britain are designed according to EU legislation. And not just sold, but largely produced as well. If anyone is producing anything at all in the UK, which they intend to sell to the EU, then the producers will not pay any attention to the British standards. It doesn't matter that they're based in Britain. It doesn't matter that the British standards are lower. They will produce to the EU standards regardless, because otherwise they can't sell their product. We didn't stop adopting EU rules. We just stopped deciding what those rules should be. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.